This is the Al-Ma'idah Initiative, conversation without compromise.
So the premise is that if somebody else is a Christian, and I believe that God has forgiven their sins and God has forgiven my sins, I don't get to hold them accountable for their sins against me. Now, I may, in as far as a repayment sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Out of love, I may confront my brothers or sisters to say, hey, you shouldn't be acting like this. But I'm going to be fine. I have been, whatever they've done to me, I have done much worse towards God. And I deserve much worse and have been let off for much worse. And that comes through the cross, right?
Mm-hmm.
So God, through Jesus, paid for all of my sins. He didn't just let me off.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't just let them off. He actually makes payment for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the same way that my sins are forgiven are the same way that their sins are forgiven. And God says, trust me for your future. Trust me for righteousness, for justice.
Mm-hmm.
So I can assume as a Christian that everyone who sins against me, if they don't trust God, that God will deal with their sins, right?
Mm-hmm.
By making them pay for it
Mm-hmm.
Through punishment.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody has repented of their sin and trusted Jesus and, maybe forgets to talk to me about it, I can trust that God has dealt with their sin, that he's transformed them from it, and ultimately he's not going to hurt me in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that I can't demand any payment from them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I demand payment from them, I am scorning the mercy that I have received.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say we shouldn't apologize to each other or try and make things right if we've wronged somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But as a Christian, I'm not allowed to expect some sort of repayment from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm expecting that from God, and I trust God for that, and trusting him that my accounts will be made.
And I think we have that as well in Islam, but it's optional. It's not something that you have to forgive.
Right.
So one verse that God mentioned, like, do you not love for God to forgive you? Right. Like God was commanding one of the companions to forgive a relative of his that committed that kind of was spreading slander about his daughter. And then God told him to forgive him and to continue being kind to him, although he insulted, was kind of, spreading this gossip or slander about his daughter. And another statement, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, says that those who are merciful, God will be merciful to them. Be merciful to the people of the earth, and the one in the heaven will be merciful to you. And even the angels will be merciful to you. So there is this, we share that, like, hey, if you forgive, if you're compassionate, God will give you, will reward you for your compassion, will reward you for your forgiveness. He will, and if you're harsh against people, like the Prophet says again, whoever is harsh towards people, then God will be harsh towards him. If you're, how can I say, like, kind of like very tedious. You're fighting people for small things, and you're harsh against people for small mistakes, and you don't forgive anything, and you just have this very harsh and aggressive personality towards people. Well, if you're going to treat people like that, then God is going to hold you accountable like that for your mistakes towards him. So in essence, like, God has forgiven you, so you should forgive people, right? So we definitely believe in that, and we share that, and I think it motivates us to be more merciful. But in Islam, there's a line where, where we're like, there's things are optional and it's not required. You can forgive, right? You can let go of an oppression. You can forgive the one who did injustice to you, but you're not required to. And not forgiving doesn't make you a bad person. It deprives you of a greater reward that you would have got if you forgave.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would have gotten a greater reward with God if you forgave. But if you don't, and you want to settle for just justice and fairness, then you have the right to take that option.
Right. I noticed this when I was reading about kind of the difference between revenge in Christianity and Islam.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of based, and it's all about the timing of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Islam, you've got, it's better not to take revenge,
Yeah.
and you may get a great reward from that.
Yeah.
In Christianity, it's you have already received mercy, therefore you are mandated to give mercy, right?
Mhm,
It's all
mhm.
about when the mercy takes place, right?
Yeah.
In Orthodox Islamic theology, you're living your life hoping for some future mercy. In Christian theology, you believe you've already received mercy and therefore must act in accordance with that.
Right. And I think we also agree with that we receive mercy. I think the mercy that Christian faith is referring to mercy for our sins. Like our sins have already been forgiven. That's
Yes.
already been done, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Muslims like, no, like God has given us mercy. He will give us even more mercy. But that does not negate responsibility, or that does not mean that we won't be held accountable for our sins. And so I think that's the difference. Whereas Muslims, we believe we're encompassed in God's mercy. That God is showing us His mercy every second, every moment, every experience, every feeling, everything we experience through our existence. We're experiencing God's mercy. We're experiencing God's mercy through revelation and the guidance that God has bestowed upon us. But the forgiveness of our sins, God has also forgives in general. God is very forgiving. One verse says, like, if God was to punish people for their sins, He would have like destroyed the earth, and the judgment day would have already began because of the amount of sins that people commit.
Right.
And so, but God is forgiving, and He postpones people accountability. But all of that, I think, is in balance with accountability for good deeds and bad deeds. And so, yeah, I think that's something that the concept of sins and accountability, it really changes, I think, the perspective of the Day of Judgment on accountability on the Day of Judgment. Do you think that's correct?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
So, as far as accountability on the Day of Judgment, I would believe that's true for the non-Christian,
Mm-hmm.
but not for the Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my expectation
Mm-hmm.
is that if I committed some huge sin, didn't tell anyone about it, got away with it,
Mm-hmm.
I would expect God to call me out here and now for it,
Mm-hmm.
right, and shape me up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be expecting to kind of deal with it on the Day of Judgment.
I understand that.
Right, so I wouldn't be expecting to get away with anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I wouldn't be expecting to kind of get punished in my grave or go to hell. I'd be expecting, God sends somebody to be like, hey, James, God saw,
Yeah.
what are you going to do about this? Or I'll get sick, or I don't know, any number of sort of things that could happen
Mm-hmm.
that would be a kind of like a, hey, what you doing?
Mm-hmm.
What you doing, boy? You shouldn't be acting like this, and
Yeah.
I see what you're doing, and you're my son. You act better than this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I believe in accountability.
Yeah.
But
It's here.
it's here and now.